Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a topic that I find absolutely fascinating, English idioms.
Ah, yes. They can be quite a puzzle, can't they?
They really can, especially for people learning English, you know? They can be tricky, but they also make the language so much more colorful and expressive. We're going to be looking at a YouTube podcast script today, all about English idioms, ready to unlock some secrets.
Absolutely. It's not just about sounding fluent, though. Idioms can give you a real glimpse into a culture's history, their values, their sense of humor, even.
So true. Our source actually defines idioms as phrases that, well, their figurative meaning is totally different from the literal meaning of the words.
Right, like you wouldn't actually expect cats and dogs to be falling from the sky.
Exactly. Raining cats and dogs. We know it means it's raining heavily, but I mean, have you ever thought about where that saying comes from?
It's a little grim, actually. It probably started way back when streets weren't well drained. So heavy rain would wash all sorts of stuff into the gutters, debris, and sadly, sometimes even dead animals.
Oh, okay. So maybe a little less charming than I initially thought.
Yeah, not the prettiest picture.
Yeah,
But it does show you how idioms evolve over time.
it does. Okay, let's move on to something a bit more lighthearted. How about break a leg? Any guesses on what that one means?
Now, this one is a classic example of an idiom where the literal meaning is, well, the complete opposite of what we actually mean.
Yeah, you definitely don't want someone to actually break a leg.
Not at all. But it does have something to do with good luck. You're right.
I had a feeling.
It's a way of saying good luck, especially in the context of a performance or a competition.
Mm.
The origin is a bit murky, but one theory is that it comes from this superstition that wishing someone good luck might actually bring them bad luck.
Oh, interesting. So break a leg is like a reverse jinx.
Exactly.
Now that's fascinating. I mean, it makes you think about all the psychology behind these superstitions and how they, end up shaping our language. But imagine if someone who didn't know this idiom heard it for the first time.
Oh, they'd be so confused.
Right. They might think we're wishing them actual harm.
Absolutely. That's why understanding idioms is so important. It's not just about the words. It's about, navigating social situations and understanding those little nuances of communication.
For sure. They're like a secret code almost.
In a way, yes. Okay, how about another one? This one's about getting things right, being accurate, hit the nail on the head.
Sounds pretty literal, but I bet there's more to it.
There always is.
Yeah.
It does bring up that image of, hammering something perfectly, but what it really means is to be absolutely correct or to describe something perfectly, to get to the heart of the matter.
So if I was explaining something and you said you hit the nail on the head, you'd be saying I did a good job.
Exactly. It's much more vivid than just saying you're right. Idioms can really pack a lot of meaning into a few words.
And they make conversations more interesting. Okay, let's try one about secrets. Let the cat out of the bag.
Ah, a classic. It means to reveal a secret, usually without meaning to.
It does paint a pretty funny picture in my mind, like a mischievous cat escaping and causing chaos.
I can see it. The origin is a bit debated, but some say it goes back to markets where dishonest merchants might try to switch a less valuable animal, like a cat, for a more expensive one, like a piglet. They'd hide it in a bag, and if the cat got out, well, secret's out.
That makes sense, like those cartoons where a character tries to hide something and it always pops out at the worst possible moment.
Exactly. So next time you accidentally spill a secret, you can say you let the cat out of the bag.
And everyone will know exactly what I mean. Okay, I'm ready for another one. What about facing a challenge head on? Bite the bullet.
Ooh, I like that one. It really captures that feeling of, clenching your teeth and bracing yourself for something unpleasant.
Right. I always pictured it coming from those old war movies where they'd give soldiers a bullet to bite on during surgery.
To deal with the pain. That's one theory, and it definitely fits that sense of endurance. It's amazing how powerful a simple phrase can be.
Like a little time capsule, almost. Okay, this next one has to do with spending a lot of money. Cost an arm and a leg? I think I can guess, but what do you think?
It means something is super expensive, often to a ridiculous degree, like way overpriced.
Right, so if I said, that new phone cost me an arm and a leg, you wouldn't think I was literally missing limbs, would you?
No, but I know it put a serious dent in your wallet. It's way more colorful than just saying it was expensive.
Definitely. Okay, let's do something a bit easier. Piece of cake. Always makes me hungry, but I know it's not about dessert.
You're right, though. I wouldn't mind a piece of cake right now. But the idiom means something is super easy to do, like no effort at all.
So if I aced an exam, I could say, that was a piece of cake.
Exactly. Like it was as easy and enjoyable as eating, well, a piece of cake.
Yeah.
And speaking of revealing secrets, remember, let the cat out of the bag?
Yeah.
Well, we have another idiom on our list that has a similar meaning. Spill the beans.
Huh. So we have two different ways of saying the same thing. Can we use them interchangeably?
They both mean revealing a secret, but there are some subtle differences. Spill the beans often implies a more careless reveal, while let the cat out of the bag can be more deliberate, even if still unintentional.
So it depends on how the secret gets out, basically.
Yeah, it's like choosing the right shade of a color. You pick the one that fits the situation best.
Makes sense. So having multiple idioms for similar ideas gives us more options to be precise with our language.
Exactly. It's like having a whole toolbox at your disposal.
I like that analogy, a toolbox full of idioms.
The more idioms you know, the better you can express yourself.
And the more fun you can have with the language. Okay, before we go totally overboard with our idiom toolbox, let's try a few more from our list. We have under the weather, kick the bucket, and the ball is in your court. Quite a mix.
They are, covering everything from health to, well, making decisions.
All right, listeners, ready for round 2 of idiom decoding? Let's start with under the weather. Think about the words themselves. What image pops into your head? What do you think it could mean?
Don't worry if you don't get it right away. These are like little puzzles, and figuring them out is half the fun.
All right, so we left you thinking about under the weather. Did you crack the code? Let's break it down. Think about the imagery. If you're under something, like a big dark cloud, it kind of suggests that feeling of being weighed down, right?
And weather often connects to how we feel physically. You know, we say we're chilly or hot, depending on the weather. So it's not a huge jump to think about health in general.
Ah, I see. So under the weather must mean feeling sick or unwell, like you're being affected by some bad weather, but it's messing with your health.
Exactly. It's a softer way of saying you're not feeling great. Now, for an idiom that's a bit, well, let's say delicate, how about kick the bucket?
Ooh, this one sounds interesting. It uses such simple words, but I have a feeling it's about something kind of big. What do you think?
This is a perfect example of how idioms can use simple language to talk about really complex, sometimes sensitive stuff. So think about that action. Kick the bucket. What comes to mind?
Okay, kick is a strong movement. And a bucket. Wait a second, does this mean to die?
You got it. It's an informal way, sometimes even a little humorous, of saying someone has passed away. The origin is a bit unclear, but one theory links it to, well, how a pig might twitch its legs after being slaughtered, almost like kicking a bucket it's hanging from.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty intense origin story. But it shows how idioms can take a huge concept, even death, and make it memorable, maybe even a little lighthearted.
It really highlights the power of language, doesn't it? Even for sensitive topics. Sometimes humor or metaphors help.
Okay, let's move on to an idiom about, well, taking charge and making choices. The ball is in your court. What are your thoughts on that one?
This one feels pretty straightforward. If the ball is in your court, it means it's your turn to do something, to make a move.
Right. You're absolutely right. It's often used to signal that the decision, the next step, is up to the other person. Like in sports, if you have the ball, it's your turn to play. So if I'm in a negotiation and someone says, the ball is in your court, they're basically saying, what are you going to do next?
Precisely. A subtle way of passing the responsibility. Idioms can be pretty strategic in those social situations.
Our source actually talks about how crucial learning idioms is for really mastering English. And it's not just about, impressing people with your vocabulary.
It's about truly understanding how people communicate, those subtle cues that native speakers use all the time. Think about it. If you're watching a movie and a character says, don't spill the beans, and you don't get the idiom.
You miss the whole point.
Exactly, like missing an inside joke. You hear the words, but not the real meaning behind them.
And it's not just about understanding. When you use idioms yourself, your English sounds so much more natural, more fluent.
It shows you've gone beyond the textbook, You're embracing the more colorful, expressive side of the language.
Like the difference between reading a recipe and actually cooking a delicious meal. You need those extra spices, those flavors to make it come alive.
Exactly. Idioms add that depth, texture, personality to your language. Now, our source also gives some handy tips on actually learning these tricky phrases.
Which is great. Because there are so many idioms, it can feel a bit overwhelming. Where do you even start?
Right. You wouldn't try to eat a whole cake at once.
Especially not a cake made of idioms.
Good point. So instead of trying to memorize everything, pick a few that you really like, the ones you think you might actually use. and try working them into your conversations.
That's great advice. It's like learning a new dance. You wouldn't try to learn the whole routine at once, would you?
Exactly. Small steps. Another tip, pay attention to context. Notice how idioms are used in movies, in books, even just listening to people talk. Context gives you clues to the meaning.
And don't be afraid to write things down. Keeping a list of new idioms, along with examples, can really help you remember them, like building your own idiom cheat sheet.
Love it. And practice, practice, practice. The more you use idioms, the more comfortable you'll get.
And don't be afraid to make mistakes. Everyone does. Our source also suggests checking out idiom dictionaries, online quizzes, even finding a language partner to practice with.
All great resources. It's like having a whole team of idiom coaches rooting for you.
But even with all the resources in the world, learning idioms really comes down to one thing: curiosity. You have to be interested in the language and how it works.
Absolutely. It's about embracing those quirks and realizing that sometimes the best way to communicate is to go beyond the literal meaning.
It's about finding the poetry in everyday language. Feels like we just opened this huge treasure chest of like linguistic gems.
Right. And we've only just scratched the surface. Think about it. There are thousands of these idioms out there, each one with its own little story to tell about the language, about the culture.
And the coolest part is that language, well, it never stops changing. New idioms are popping up all the time. I mean, it reflects what's happening in the world, the trends, the events. It's like this living, breathing thing, and we're all a part of it.
Exactly. Which means you, as a learner, you actually have this amazing chance to, well, not just learn English, but to kind of shape it, to be a part of its evolution.
So as we wrap up our deep dive today, we want to leave you with a little challenge and an invitation. What other English idioms have you come across? Maybe you heard them in a movie, a song, or just chatting with someone.
Don't just let them pass you by. Take a second. Think about them. What do they really mean? Where do you think they came from? How do they make you feel?
Think of idioms as these keys, right? They unlock a deeper understanding of the language. They add that color, that humor, that personality. And the more keys you have, the more doors you can open in the world of English.
That's a great way to put it. It's not just about grammar rules. It's about expressing yourself in a way that's real, engaging, and memorable.
So go out there and explore. Embrace those quirks, those challenges. Find the joy in discovering all the little hidden treasures in this amazing language.
And keep practicing those idioms.
We'll see you on our next deep dive.